I watched a man break into my workplace on the security camera while he was on the phone with me, threatening my family. The GPS showed he was calling from inside the building, and I was completely alone with a broken door between us. What happened next still keeps me awake at night, and before I tell you how I survived, now let me tell you about the longest 20 minutes of my life. I've been a 911 dispatcher for about 6 years now, working in a rural county in Minnesota. When I say rural, I mean truly isolated. We have 3 patrol cars covering a massive area, and half the time our deputies are 40 minutes away, dealing with a deer collision or a noise complaint. Our dispatch center isn't some high-tech fortress like you see in movies. It is basically a small brick annex attached to the back of the old town hall. At night, specifically the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., it is usually just me alone in that room. This happened in mid-February during a brutal cold snap. The snow had been falling heavily since noon, and by 2 in the morning the roads were dangerous. Everything was dead quiet. I hadn't received a single call in over 3 hours. The only sounds were the steady hum of the heater and the occasional crackle of static from the radio tower. At exactly 2:14 a.m., a line blinked red on my screen. I adjusted my headset and clicked answer. 911. What is your emergency? Silence greeted me, but it wasn't complete silence. Usually silence means a pocket dial or someone too afraid to speak. But this was different. I could hear something distinct. It was the sound of wind whipping against a microphone, distorted and loud. Underneath that wind, I heard breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, like someone who had just run a mile in freezing air. 911, I repeated, keeping my voice steady and professional. Can you hear me? Do you need police, fire, or medical? Nothing but that wind and the jagged breathing continued. I started the trace immediately. Usually with cell phones in rural areas, the ping is terrible. It bounces off a tower miles away and gives you a radius of maybe 5 miles. But this time something strange happened. The system locked on instantly. Phase 2 location data appeared on my screen. I frowned at the map displayed before me. The blue dot wasn't on the highway. It wasn't at any of the scattered farmhouses. The dot was blinking directly on top of the dispatch center icon, right on top of where I was sitting. I tapped the refresh button, convinced the computer was glitching. The dot didn't move. According to the GPS, the caller was standing in the staff parking lot right outside my building. A weird feeling settled deep in my stomach, cold and heavy. The dispatch center has no windows in the main room to prevent screen glare. We rely entirely on security cameras to see outside. I pulled up the camera feed for the back lot with shaking hands. The image was grainy and black and white. The snow was coming down so hard it looked like white noise on the screen. But through that digital static, I saw him. A figure stood in the middle of our small snow-covered lot. He wore a heavy parka with the hood pulled up. He wasn't moving at all. He was just standing there, facing the camera mounted above the back door. One hand remained in his pocket. The other hand held a phone up to his ear. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. I looked at the screen, then spoke directly into the headset. Sir, I can see you on the camera. You are in a restricted area. Put the phone down and state your emergency. On the monitor, I watched the figure tilt his head back slowly. He looked straight up at the camera lens, almost like he was looking me directly in the eyes through that wire connection. Through my headset, the heavy breathing stopped abruptly. A voice spoke. It was calm. Too calm. The back door isn't latching properly in this cold, the man said clearly. You should check it. I froze completely. I knew for a fact the back door had issues. The weather stripping froze up when temperatures dropped below 0, and sometimes the magnetic lock didn't engage fully. Nobody should have known that except staff. Who is this? I demanded, my hand hovering over the radio button to alert the deputies. You really need to pay more attention, the voice said smoothly. Not just to the door, but to where you leave your things. I keyed the radio mic immediately, my training kicking in despite the fear. Dispatch to all units. I have a 1033 at the station. Suspicious subject in the rear lot. Possible attempted entry. I am alone in the building. Copy that. Dispatch. Deputy Miller's voice came back through heavy static. I am way out on County Road 9. It is going to take me at least 20 minutes with these roads. 20 minutes. I was alone for 20 minutes. I looked back at the camera monitor. The parking lot was empty. The man was gone. Sir, I said into the phone line, which remained open. Don't worry about me, the voice said, and I could hear a smile in his words. I am not coming in yet. I just wanted to make sure you were awake. I need you to listen very carefully. Help is on the way, I lied, trying to keep my voice strong. They're 2 minutes out. No, they aren't, he laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound that made my skin crawl. I listened to the scanner. Miller is near the county line. You are all alone in that box, but you know who isn't alone. I stopped breathing entirely. What are you talking about? I managed to ask. Your house. Elm Street, blue siding, nice porch. My blood ran cold. That was my exact address. My wife and my 6-year-old daughter were there right now, probably sleeping. You leave them out of this, I stammered, my professional demeanor cracking completely. My friend is parked 2 houses down, the man continued in that same calm voice. He is watching your house right now. He tells me the living room light just turned off. Your wife must have fallen asleep on the couch. Does she know you forget to lock the garage side door sometimes? I felt physically nauseous. I grabbed my personal cell phone with my shaking left hand and started texting my wife frantically, praying she wasn't actually asleep. Lock the doors now, I typed with trembling fingers. Why are you doing this? I asked, trying desperately to keep him talking. Because you people think you can just ruin lives and go home to your warm houses and forget about it, he hissed. The anger in his voice was sudden and violent, a complete shift from his previous calm. Then I heard a sound that made me jump out of my chair. It came from the hallway directly behind me, the unmistakable sound of the back door handle being depressed and released. He wasn't in the parking lot anymore. He was right outside the door, and if the magnetic lock had failed, like he said, he was about to come inside. I ran to the heavy steel door that separates the dispatch room from the hallway and threw the deadbolt with shaking hands. I backed into the corner of the room, my eyes glued to the internal camera feed showing the hallway. I watched the back exterior door swing open. A blast of snow blew into the hallway, followed by the man in the parka. He stepped inside casually and shook the snow off his shoulders like he was coming home from work. He looked up at the hallway camera and waved slowly. I told you the latch was broken, he said into the phone. I could hear his voice through my headset and faintly through the wall separating us. He walked toward the dispatch room door, the only barrier between us now. He didn't try to kick it down or ram it. He just leaned his forehead against the steel door gently. You sent the police to my house, he whispered, his voice suddenly thick with emotion. Last year, you took the call. I frantically searched my memory. I take thousands of calls every year. Domestic disputes, thefts, accidents, overdoses. I couldn't place him or his voice. I don't know who you are, I yelled through the door. My friend at your house. He is getting impatient, the man said, ignoring my words. He just texted me. He says he sees movement in the upstairs window. Your daughter's room. Don't you touch them, I screamed, looking around desperately for a weapon, a stapler, fire extinguisher, anything. Open the door, he commanded, his voice going cold. Open this door right now and I'll call him off. If you wait for the cops, he goes inside. It was an impossible choice. If I opened the door, he would almost certainly kill me. If I didn't, he claimed his partner would hurt my family. But my training kicked in through the panic. Never open the door. If I am dead, I can't help anyone. I sent patrol units to my house immediately, and then I bluffed again. They're already there, I said as confidently as I could manage. Liar, he spat. Suddenly, he started slamming his body against the door with tremendous force. The heavy steel frame rattled and shook, but it held. The sound was deafening in that small space. Dispatch. Deputy Miller's voice screamed over the radio. We're pulling into the lot now. Where is he? Hallway. I yelled into the radio. He is inside the hallway. On the external camera monitor, I saw the beautiful sight of blue and red lights flashing against the white snow. 2 deputies were sprinting toward the back door with guns drawn. The man on the other side of my door must have heard the sirens cut off. He stopped banging immediately. Game over, he whispered into the phone, and I heard resignation in his voice. I heard shouting in the hallway moments later. Polis, get on the ground, show me your hands. There was a brief scuffle, the sound of a body hitting the floor hard, and the distinct metallic click of handcuffs. Subject in custody, Miller panted over the radio. We got him. I slumped against the wall, sliding down to the floor. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I immediately dialed my wife with shaking hands. She answered on the first ring, hysterical. Are you okay? I saw your text. She was crying. I locked everything. I grabbed our daughter and we're in the bathroom. Is anyone there? I asked urgently. Did you see anyone outside? I don't know, she sobbed. I heard a car speed off right after you texted me. A car with a loud engine. The police sent a unit to my house immediately, but they never found the second car. They did find footprints in the snow near my garage though, proving someone had definitely been standing there watching my home. If this story is making your heart race, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which part scared you the most. Trust me, the ending gets even worse. We discovered the truth later that morning at the station. The man who broke into the dispatch center was named David K. I didn't recognize the name at first, but then the sergeant pulled up the case file. 8 months prior, I had taken a 911 call from a woman whispering frantically that her son was in a violent rage, destroying the house and threatening her with a knife. I had dispatched officers to the scene immediately. The situation escalated when police arrived. The son attacked the officers with the knife and was arrested. He was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison for aggravated assault and attempted murder of police officers. The man in my hallway, David, was that man's older brother. He blamed me completely. He believed that if I hadn't sent the police so quickly, or if I had somehow categorized the call differently, his brother wouldn't be in prison. The logic made no sense, but grief and anger rarely do. He had spent months learning my schedule, finding out where I lived, tracking my routine. He waited specifically for a night when the weather would keep police far away, giving him maximum time to terrorize me. The scariest part wasn't even the man at my door. It was what police found on his phone. The logs showed dozens of texts between him and the accomplice at my house. One text, sent just 2 minutes before police arrived at my home, read, "He is not coming out. Go ahead and break the window." If Deputy Miller had been 60 seconds slower getting to the station, I don't want to think about what would have happened to my family that night. I still work at dispatch, but everything changed after that night. When it snows now, I always double-check the back door personally, and I keep a loaded handgun in my desk drawer, locked but accessible. Some might say I am paranoid, but I know what can happen when you let your guard down for even a moment. The police told me someone had been sitting in my backseat for hours, waiting for me to finish my shift. I found muddy footprints on the upholstery facing toward where my head would have been while driving. But that is not even the scariest part. The scariest part is how he got in there, and what he left for me to find. Before I tell you what happened, make sure you are subscribed because the stories on this channel only get more disturbing. You know, those cheap motels right off the interstate. The ones with flickering neon signs that say, "Vacancy" in faded red letters, and carpets that haven't been changed since 1990. That is where I work. It is not a career. It is not even something I am proud of. It is just a way to earn a paycheck while I complete my degree online. Usually the night shift is mind-numbingly boring. I sit behind the bulletproof glass partition at the front desk, watch Netflix on my phone, and occasionally buzz in a trucker looking for a few hours of sleep before getting back on the road. The pay is terrible and the work is mindless, but at least it is usually safe. Last Tuesday was different. We were in the middle of a massive blizzard, the kind that shuts down everything. The highway patrol had actually closed Interstate 95 in both directions because of black ice. By midnight, the place was dead silent in an eerie way. We only had 3 occupied rooms in the entire motel, which is 30 rooms total. The wind was hammering against the automatic glass doors at the entrance, and the snow was coming down sideways, so thick I couldn't see the gas station across the road. I figured I was in for 8 hours of absolutely nothing. Just me and the howling wind. At exactly 2 in the morning, the motion sensor for the front entrance triggered. I looked up, genuinely surprised. I hadn't seen any headlights pull into the overhang, and usually you can see them coming from pretty far away even in bad weather. A man walked through the doors. He was huge, easily 6'3" or taller, dressed in heavy winter gear. He wore a thick parka, snow pants, and a scarf wrapped so tightly around his face. I could only see his eyes peering out. He was absolutely covered in snow, not just a light dusting from walking from his car, but caked in it, like he'd been rolling around outside or walking through drifts. He approached the night window slowly, his boots leaving wet tracks on the tile floor. I slid the glass partition open. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Room," he grunted. His voice was muffled behind the scarf, making it hard to understand. "Sure thing," I said, pulling up the computer. "It is $65 for the night. I'll need to see an ID and a credit card." He didn't move for several long seconds. Then he reached into a pocket with a gloved hand and slapped a wad of cash onto the counter. The bills were wet, like they'd been sitting in melted snow. "Wallet's in the car," he said, his voice slightly clearer now. "Doors are frozen shut. I just need to warm up before I deal with it." I hesitated. It was a direct violation of policy. And I mean strict policy. No ID, no room, no exceptions. That is what the manager drilled into us during training. But honestly, it was 20 degrees below zero outside with the wind chill making it feel even colder. This guy was visibly shivering. I didn't want to be the person who let someone freeze to death over a piece of plastic. "Fine," I sighed, counting the cash. "Room 104, down the hall, first floor. Checkout is at 11. I slid him the key card. He took it without saying thanks or even nodding, then trudged down the hallway, leaving a trail of melting snow and mud on the linoleum behind him. I went back to my phone, but after about 40 minutes, something started bothering me. It was a small thing, but it gnawed at the back of my mind. He said his car doors were frozen shut, right? But somehow he managed to get his wallet out to get the cash. That didn't quite add up. More importantly, I realized something else. I never actually heard an engine. Even with the wind howling, I usually hear cars pulling up under the awning. The sound echoes in a specific way. I have a monitor behind the desk that cycles through security camera feeds. I pulled up the exterior front entrance camera and rewound the footage to 2 o'clock. The screen showed the driveway and parking area. It was completely empty. No car had pulled up. I rewound further, confused. 1:50 a.m., still empty. I kept going back until I hit 1:45. That is when I saw him. He didn't come from the road at all. He walked directly out of the dense woods behind the hotel. On the grainy black and white camera footage, he looked like a dark shadow detaching itself from the tree line. He walked slowly, deliberately across the parking lot, his path completely straight. He walked right up to the glass front doors, but he didn't come inside. He stopped right in front of the doors, maybe 2 feet from the glass. I fast-forwarded the footage with growing dread. 1:50, he was still standing there, motionless. 2 o'clock, still there, just standing in the blizzard. My stomach dropped sickeningly. For 15 full minutes, this man had stood outside in a raging blizzard, staring through the glass doors, from his angle and position. He would have been looking directly at me while I sat at the desk watching videos on my phone. He was watching me work. He was studying me, learning my routine, my movements, where I looked and where I didn't. I felt cold sweat break out on the back of my neck, despite the building's heat. I grabbed the landline to call the manager, but before I could dial, the phone rang, making me jump. The caller ID showed room 106. That was the room right next to the guy I had just checked in. "Front desk," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey," a woman's voice whispered urgently. She sounded terrified, her words coming fast. "This is the lady from 106. Someone is trying to open the connecting door between my room and the next one." My heart started hammering hard. "Room 104. I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes," she hissed, her voice dropping even lower. "He is jiggling the handle very slowly, and he is scratching at the wood. Please, you have to send someone." "I am calling the police right now," I said, my mouth going dry. "Lock yourself in the bathroom immediately. Bring your phone, do not open any doors. Do you understand?" "Okay," she whispered, and I heard genuine fear in her voice. "Please hurry." I hung up and dialed 911 with shaking hands because the roads were officially closed. State troopers were already patrolling the highway nearby, helping stranded motorists. The dispatcher said they could have someone there in 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. I grabbed a can of pepper spray from the drawer, the only weapon we're allowed to keep at the desk. I stood with my back pressed against the wall, watching the hallway through the glass partition. I kept expecting the huge man in the parka to come charging back toward the lobby. Blue lights finally flashed outside, reflecting off the falling snow. 2 state troopers came through the doors, stomping snow off their boots. Their hands rested on their holstered weapons. I gave them the master key and pointed down the hall with a trembling hand. "Room 104, I said. "Please be careful." They unholstered their weapons and moved down the corridor in formation. I watched on the security monitor as they positioned themselves on either side of the door. One of them knocked hard. "State police." "Open the door." Nothing. No response. No movement. They used the master key and kicked the door open, weapons raised. They swept inside quickly, and I held my breath watching the monitor. A few seconds later, one of them came back out and waved me down urgently. I walked down the hall on legs that felt like jelly, my heart pounding in my ears. The room was completely empty. The bed hadn't been touched. still perfectly made, but the window was wide open, letting in a swirling torrent of snow. The screen had been popped out from the inside and was lying in the snow outside. He was gone.
He must have bailed when he heard the sirens, the trooper said, holstering his gun and surveying the room. We'll search the woods. But in this weather, tracks fill up fast. We'll probably lose the trail within minutes. Then the trooper pointed to the small table near the television. He left something for you, though. My blood turned to ice. There was a piece of hotel stationery on the desk, the kind we leave in every room. Written in shaky, jagged handwriting, like someone writing with their non-dominant hand, was a short note. It read, "You seem nice. Check your car before you drive home." My car? I asked stupidly. Is your vehicle here? The trooper asked, suddenly alert. Yeah, it is parked around the side of the building, the red Honda Civic. We walked out together into the screaming wind. The cold hit me like a physical blow after being inside. We trudged through the snow to the employee parking area. My car sat there covered in a thick layer of white, looking completely undisturbed, just like all the other vehicles. Check the inside, the trooper said, shining his heavy-duty flashlight through the driver's side window. I unlocked it with my remote. The lights flashed and the locks clicked. I opened the driver's side door, my hands shaking. The front seat looked fine. Nothing was stolen or disturbed. My gym bag was still there on the passenger seat. My phone charger dangled from the outlet. It looks okay, I said, breathing a small sigh of relief. Maybe he was just trying to scare me. Check the back seat, the trooper said, his voice grim. I opened the rear driver's side door, and my stomach lurched. The upholstery was absolutely soaked. There were 2 massive muddy puddles on the fabric of the back seat, the unmistakable shape of boot prints. They weren't fresh. The mud was starting to freeze in the cold air, turning crusty. The trooper shone his light onto the floorboard. There were candy wrappers in a melted pile of dirty snow, and empty water bottles, signs someone had been there for a while. He wasn't just watching you from outside, the trooper said quietly. His jaw tight, he pointed his light at the muddy footprints again. They were facing forward toward the driver's seat. He was sitting in your car, the trooper said, and I could hear the anger in his voice. He was waiting for you to finish your shift and get in. I stared at those wet footprints, positioned exactly where someone would sit directly behind the driver, right behind where my head would have been. I imagined driving down the dark highway, thinking I was alone, while someone sat in my back seat in the darkness. He must have gotten cold waiting, the trooper continued. So he decided to come inside and get a room instead. Probably figured he'd stay warm and watch you for a while longer before making his move. I looked at the wet seat, the muddy prints, the trash. If he hadn't gotten impatient, if he hadn't decided to come inside where I could see him, I would have finished my shift at 7 in the morning, walked out to my car without checking, gotten in, and started driving. And I wouldn't have been alone. If you are feeling that creeping dread right now, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. These stories get more disturbing every week, and you won't want to miss what is coming next. The state police searched for him all night, but they never found him. The woods behind the motel are dense and stretch for miles. They found a few partial footprints, but the blizzard covered everything within minutes. I quit that job the next day. I didn't even go back for my last paycheck. The manager could mail it to me. There was no amount of money worth going back into that building at night, knowing that someone could be watching from the woods. Waiting. I still drive that Honda, but now I check the back seat every single time before I get in. Every single time without fail. Even in broad daylight. Even in my own driveway. The machine was supposed to laugh every 5 minutes to attract kids, but at 3 in the morning I heard 2 laughs. One was the machine, the other was something else. Something wet and human, coming from inside a rack of coats 10 feet in front of me. What I found hiding there proved I hadn't been alone in that abandoned mall all night.
Before we get into this nightmare, hit that subscribe button because the story you are about to hear will make you never look at empty buildings the same way again. I've worked a lot of dead-end jobs in my life. The kind you take when you need money fast and can't afford to be picky. But the security gig at the old Northridge Mall was supposed to be the easiest of them all. It was late December, and I desperately needed extra cash for the holidays. My credit cards were maxed out and rent was due in a week. The Northridge Mall was one of those places that was absolutely huge in the 90s, but was now slowly dying a miserable death. Half the storefronts were empty, covered with temporary drywall, and the skylights were so dirty they made even bright midday sun look gray and depressing. The few stores that remained open were the kind that couldn't afford rent anywhere else. My shift was the graveyard, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The hiring manager, a guy named Dave who looked like he hadn't slept properly in about a decade, gave me the quick tour on my first night. He showed me the fire exits, the breaker rooms, the loading docks, and finally the security office, where I could watch the camera feeds and do my reports. "It gets cold in here at night," Dave told me, zipping up his worn jacket. "Management turns the heating way down after closing to save money, so bring a thermos of coffee or something." "Got it," I said, adjusting the heavy security belt they'd given me. "Anything else I should worry about? Break-ins? Vandalism?" Dave laughed, but it was a dry, humorless sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Nah, nobody wants to steal from this place anymore," he said, shaking his head. "There is nothing valuable left. Just walk the perimeter once an hour, check all the doors, and the rest of the time you can sit in the office. Easy money." He handed me a ring of keys and a heavy Maglite flashlight, then basically fled to his car. I didn't think much of it at the time. The first couple of hours were fine, even peaceful in a weird way. It was bitterly cold outside, a real heavy winter storm moving through the area. I could hear the wind howling and whistling against the large glass entrance doors, and snow was piling up against the exterior in growing drifts. Inside, the mall was silent. Not normal quiet, but that heavy, pressurized silence you only get in a massive empty building. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat and breathing. Around 1 a.m, I was doing my second round of the ground floor. I was walking past the kids zone, a small amusement area situated right in front of the old food court. It had those coin-operated rides you see in malls, a small carousel that didn't work anymore, a rocket ship ride, and a weird cartoon train with a creepy painted smile. Suddenly, the oppressive silence was shattered. "Haha, all aboard for fun." The voice was loud, cheerful, and completely electronic. I jumped about a foot in the air, spinning around with my flashlight raised like a weapon. My heart hammered against my ribs as adrenaline flooded my system. The sound echoed through the empty corridors, bouncing off the shuttered metal gates of closed stores and fading slowly into silence. I shone the light toward the kid zone. The little cartoon train was rocking back and forth on its base for about 10 seconds, its painted eyes looking unnervingly bright in the beam of my flashlight. The mechanical movement was jerky and unnatural, and then it stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was just a glitch, a timer issue. These old rides probably ran on automatic demos to attract kids when the mall was open. Nobody had bothered to turn them off when they closed. I continued my walk, trying to shake off the jolt of fear. My hands were still trembling slightly. 5 minutes later, I was near the old cinema entrance when I heard it again. Fainter this time, coming from behind me. All aboard for fun. I checked my watch, it read 1:05 a.m. I realized then what Dave hadn't bothered to tell me during the tour. They didn't cut the power to the kids' rides. Maybe they were hardwired into the building's electrical system, or maybe nobody cared enough to flip the breaker switch. Either way, every 5 minutes exactly, that stupid train would go through its demo mode, trying to attract children who weren't there. By 3 a.m, the fear had transformed into pure teeth-grinding annoyance. It was absolutely maddening. No matter where I was in the sprawling mall, no matter which floor or which distant corner, I could hear that tiny, distorted digital laughter echoing through the darkness. It became the rhythm of my night, marking time in 5-minute intervals. I tried to stay in the security office with the door closed, but the walls were thin and cheap, and I could still hear the muffled cry of the machine seeping through. At 3:45, I decided to do a full sweep of the second floor just to get away from the immediate vicinity of the kid zone, and that infernal noise. The mall was absolutely freezing now. I could see my breath in the air, little clouds appearing in my flashlight beam. The shadows cast by mannequins in the dark clothing store windows looked disturbingly. like people frozen in place, and more than once I had to double check that they weren't actually moving. I walked the entire length of the upper balcony, my footsteps echoing on the tile. I looked down at the dark atrium below. The snowstorm outside had intensified dramatically. The skylights were completely covered in white, making the interior of the mall pitch black, except for the red glow of emergency exit signs and my flashlight beam. At 3:55 a.m., I was leaning against the railing on the second floor, looking down at the shadowy food court below. I was exhausted, cold, and wanted nothing more than for this shift to end so I could go home and sleep. Haha, aboard for fun. The train below chirped right on schedule. I rolled my eyes. Shut up, I muttered to the empty air. I waited in silence. The quiet settled back in like a heavy blanket. I checked my watch, counting down to 4 o'clock. Just 2 more hours until 6. Then I could leave this creepy place. 4 o'clock arrived like clockwork. I pushed off the railing and turned to head toward the dead escalators to go back down to ground level. Then I heard it. It came from somewhere on the ground floor, near the entrance of the old JCPenney department store. Maybe 50 feet away from the kids' rides. It was laughter, but it wasn't the machine. The machine's laugh was digital, perfectly repetitive, with that tinny speaker quality. This sound was completely different. It was wet, throatier, more organic. It sounded like a grown man trying to giggle like a child, but failing miserably. It was a sharp, high-pitched that trailed off into a wheezing sound. I froze completely, every muscle in my body going rigid. My boots squeaked slightly on the tile, and I winced at the noise. "Hello," I called out, and my voice cracked. "Mall security. The mall is crowdy. The mall is closed." Absolute silence greeted me. I told myself firmly that I was imagining things. The acoustics in this massive empty building were weird and unpredictable. Maybe the wind outside sounded like voices. Maybe the train's audio system was breaking down and warping. There had to be a logical explanation. But then that stupid instinct, the same one that gets people killed in horror movies, kicked in hard. I needed to know. It was my job to check, to investigate. I couldn't just leave it. I walked down the dead escalator, the rubber steps hard and cold under my feet. I kept my flashlight off for a few seconds, trying to let my eyes adjust to the darkness, but it was too complete. I couldn't see anything. I clicked the beam back on with slightly shaking hands. The circle of light swept slowly across the empty plastic tables of the food court. Nothing there. I swept it methodically over the kids' zone. The little train sat there motionless, its painted smile looking genuinely sinister in the heavy shadows. I checked my watch. 4:04 a.m., 1 minute. Until the train went off again on its 5-minute cycle. I walked closer to the JCPenney entrance, where I thought I had heard that second laugh. There was a large display of winter coats set up right in the middle of the wide aisle, leading into the store. A temporary promotional thing they probably set up, I asked, gripping the flashlight tighter in my sweating hand. It was a heavy Maglite, solid metal. If I had to hit someone with it, it would do real damage. 4:05 a.m. arrived behind me. The machine started up precisely on time. All aboard for fun. And then overlapping it completely, I heard the other sound again, the wet, human giggling. It came from inside the coat display directly in front of me. My blood turned to ice in my veins. This wasn't an echo. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't acoustic tricks. Someone was physically hiding in that rack of coats, sandwiched between the heavy parkas hanging there. I should have run immediately. I should have turned around, sprinted straight to the security office, locked the door, and called the police. That is what training says to do. That is what common sense screams at you to do. But my legs felt impossibly heavy, like I was moving through deep water. My brain couldn't process what was happening fast enough. "Come out," I said, trying desperately to sound tough and authoritative. But I was shaking visibly. "I can see you." I couldn't actually see anyone, but I hoped the bluff would work. Maybe they'd panic and run. The rack of hanging clothes rustled distinctly. A hand slowly pushed 2 heavy wool coats apart from the inside. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't some kind of supernatural monster. It was a man. He looked to be in his 40s, maybe older. His face was smeared with grease or dirt,
making it hard to see his features clearly. He was wearing layers upon layers of mismatched clothes that gave off a strong smell of wet dog and stale alcohol. His eyes were wide and unblinking, reflecting my flashlight beam like an animal's eyes. They didn't look quite human in that moment. He was smiling, but it wasn't any kind of friendly smile. His mouth was open way too wide, showing yellow, uneven teeth. "The train is funny," he hissed, his voice raspy like he hadn't used it properly in days. "It tells jokes." I took an involuntary step backward. "Sir, you need to leave right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't be in here." He didn't move his body at all, just his head, tilting it slowly to the side like a confused dog or a bird. In his right hand, partially hidden by the sleeve of one of the coats, I saw the unmistakable glint of something metallic catching my flashlight. It looked like a pair of fabric shears, those big heavy scissors used for cutting thick cloth in sewing. The blades looked sharp. "It is cold outside," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "I know it is," I stammered, "but you can't stay here. I have to call the police. You are trespassing." The man's smile dropped instantly, like a switch had been flipped. His expression went completely flat and emotionless, which was somehow more terrifying than the smile. "No police," he said firmly. He stepped fully out of the rack of coats. He was tall, much taller than me, maybe 6'2" or 6'3". His layers of clothes made him look even bigger. All aboard for fun. The machine blared behind me, 4:10 a.m. Right on schedule. The sound seemed to trigger something in him. His face changed. He lunged forward with shocking speed. He threw himself forward with a burst of manic energy I didn't expect from someone who looked half homeless. I swung the flashlight wildly, pure panic taking over my body. The heavy metal beam connected hard with his shoulder, and I felt the impact run up my arm. But he barely seemed to notice. He just kept coming. He swung the fabric shears and I felt a sharp tug on my jacket as the blades caught the fabric, ripping cleanly through the padding, but somehow missing my actual skin by inches. I turned and ran. I didn't care about dignity or looking tough. I didn't care about the job or protocols. I just ran for my life. I sprinted toward the main entrance, my boots hammering against the hard floor, the sound echoing throughout the empty mall. Behind me, I could hear his heavy, wet breathing, and the distinct slapping sound of his shoes as he chased me. I made it to the security office and slammed the heavy door behind me, throwing the deadbolt with trembling, fumbling fingers. I backed away from the door, my chest heaving, grabbing the landline phone on the desk through the reinforced glass window of the office. I saw him emerge slowly from the darkness of the main mall area. He stopped about 10 feet away from my door. He stared directly at me through the glass, not even breathing hard. He raised the fabric shears deliberately and clicked them together slowly. The metallic sound made my skin crawl. Then he did that laugh again, that horrible wet giggling. I dialed 911, never taking my eyes off him for even a second. "There is a man in the Northridge Mall," I told the operator urgently. "He has a weapon. He is trying to attack me. Please send someone now." As soon as he saw me talking clearly on the phone, as soon as he realized police were being called, the man turned calmly and casually walked away. He disappeared back into the darkness of the department store like a shadow, the shears still in his hand. If this story has you on edge, smash that like button and leave a comment. Let me know if you've ever worked somewhere that gave you creepy vibes like this. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, which felt like an eternity. They swept the entire building with K-9 units, German shepherds trained to find people. They found his nest. He had set up a little living area behind the old jewelry display cases in the department store. Hidden from casual view, there was a dirty sleeping bag, dozens of empty food wrappers from the food court trash bins, and a pile of lost and found items he must have stolen from the security desk before I even started my shift. He'd probably been living there for days, maybe even weeks. They never found the man himself. The back delivery door near the old cinema had been pried open from the outside, probably days ago based on the damage. The lock was completely broken. He could come and go whenever he wanted. The cops told me he was likely just a homeless drifter looking to escape the blizzard, trying to find somewhere warm to sleep. But that explanation didn't satisfy me at all. That didn't explain the fabric shears. That didn't explain the way he smiled. That didn't explain why he chased me instead of just running away when discovered. I quit the next morning without even asking for my paycheck. They could mail it to me or keep it. I didn't care. I work at a toll booth now. It is boring. The pay is somehow even worse, and I have to deal with angry drivers all day. But at least I can see everything coming at me from a mile away. At least I am never alone in a dark building with someone hiding in the shadows. At least the only sounds I hear are cars and wind. Not mechanical laughter echoing in empty spaces.